Well, welcome once again, Marta, back for yet another go on the Quantum Creating Podcast. I believe this is our third individual and one collective with hubby Cliff.
Or already. We said we were going to do it monthly, right?
We said we were going to do it monthly. And you know what? I think that what we're going to do with this one is we were just about to launch your second one on Monday coming up. But I think I might put, because of what's happened in the last month, in just a month, right? I think that this one may go first. So I apologise in advance for the lack of continuity, but I think this has value, will have value today. Now, we were just talking off camera about your experience in the queue at Waitrose and in general about the situation which is going on. As we know, we're deep into lockdown here in the UK and pretty much around the world. Tell us that story again now that we're recording. And
well, we realised that we should have been recording it from the start. So that
we should have been recording it from the start, and I will take full responsibility as always for not doing that. So crack on, Marta.
What's really interesting, saying, continuing from what you said, just very quickly, Cliff just mentioned before I came upstairs to record this with you, Cliff just mentioned to me that a quarter of the entire human population is on lockdown right now.
Wow.
It's nuts just to wrap your head around that, right?
So that's like almost 2 billion people.
Yeah.
That's
staggering. That pause was just required there for everybody to kind of get in and for it to, just us, just as much as everybody listening, for it to sink in, right? And what happened this morning? I was standing outside Waitrose with Cliff. At least in the UK, we could still go out together. In some of the countries, you can't. It's just one person at a time. So obviously 2 meters or more apart, and they were letting people in. As soon as someone left, another person was going in, which, to be honest with you, is just a blissful shopping experience because there's like 30 people in the entire supermarket. But when you take everything out of why it's happening, it's incredible. But when you actually come back to the here and now and what's going on, it's a little bit bizarre and intense at points to experience. So what I was saying to you just off camera, that I noticed a guy wandering in between the aisles with a cardboard sign hanging off his neck at the back of his body saying immunosuppressed. And I believe the bottom bit was just requesting people to stay further away from him so he's not compromised. And in one moment, I wanted to take a picture of it and write about it. But then in the other moment, literally, I had that wave wash over me of compassion towards someone who's just not educated from the perspective to the depth and to the extent like someone like Cliff and myself, for example. And it was just so overwhelming that I literally had tears in my eyes, where the poor dude feels he's so threatened, whether he knows online shopping is available or not. Mm-hmm. But to go to the extent that he feels it's necessary for him to put a sign on his back for people to stay away, right, because he's worried he might get sick. It was just a very intense experience for me to realize that I might think it's silly, but for somebody else, it might be a very serious matter that is life-threatening.
It's incredible. And it reminds me very much of a post I put in on Facebook actually a couple of days ago. And I was talking about awareness and how a deep understanding, an increase in awareness leads to certain things. And I put 5 up. I could have put 50 up, really, because the benefits are incredible. But 2 spring to mind. I'll go through all of these on this podcast because I'd love to get your views on them. But 2 spring to mind with that story that you've just said. One of them is that we are not victims.
Yeah.
And the second one is that there is no power external to us. And I think that in certain circumstances, through probably ignorance, not through not being intelligent, there's a difference between ignorance and intelligence. But by not being aware of certain things, we allow ourselves to live as victims and therefore give away our power. we disempower ourselves, and then we're at the mercy of whatever is going on externally, don't you think?
Absolutely. And that brings me to the 4 stages of life that I talk about to our clients. And it's in fact on one of our group programs. It's one of the assignments when we talk about people's environment and its importance and its effect on our life and our health and our well-being. We born us as life. Life is us. We have no idea, no distinction between us and anything else. The separation doesn't exist because we're simply not aware of it. But the moment where we go to school, we're beginning to be bred into the mentality of the fact that life happens to us. And that's where the victim mentality and victim mindset comes from. And we still can't really do much about it because a vast majority of the world thinks that way and believes in the fact that life happens to us and that we have no control over anything. And, you know, whether we go down the spiritual route of control being an illusion, that's a different conversation. But for the sake of our day-to-day life, most people stop at that second stage from school, from our parents, from their beliefs and their behaviors. We believe that life happens to us. We have no control over anything that goes on, and that we are being influenced by everything from the outside, or from the outside in versus the inside out. And then for majority of people, that's how it carries on for the rest of their lives. Some of us get to the point, whether it's through health issues and challenges, whether it is through whatever moment. We talked about some of those moments over our previous podcasts. Something happens when we start questioning it. And when we start inquiring whether there is a different option and there is a different way. And that's when people start realizing that life actually happens for them. When people start seeing the gifts in the challenges we experience, the lessons from the hardship that we might go through, people start realizing that life happens for them. And actually everything that we experience is a lesson. Everything we experience can be also passed on to others. And when we get to that stage, we can embrace the 4th stage of life when we realize that life happens through us, that we're just a vessel. That we're just a vessel for this experience, to express ourselves, to learn from our own experiences, to pass it on to other people, to create that ripple effect. So every single one of us benefits from our lessons being passed on to others. So that's the 4th stage. And not many people get to that point. And especially in the time right now, it is even more challenging, even for the people that would be living in the 3rd and the 4th stage of life and awareness. Sometimes even that point is challenged through what's going on right now, because we're questioning, okay, do I actually have any control over all this? Do I have any choice in all this? So it's very easy through threat, through worry, through stress, uncertainty, to slip straight back into that 2nd stage of life when we're being the victim of our circumstances. So it's fascinating to watch and observe, and it's been fascinating for me to watch myself personally, and obviously interact with all of our clients and hear their part of the story and how they're dealing with what's going on. And the only thing I always say to everybody, and I did mention that on one of our live streams the other day as well, is that we always swimming in an ocean of influence. And I think it was James Hollis that said that in his book, Through the Dark Woods. Mm-hmm. We always swim in an ocean of influence, but within that ocean of influence, we still have a choice.
Yeah.
So that's the free will. So whatever is going on right now, I can't control the fact that they're telling me to stand 2 meters away from someone and wait until I'm allowed in to the supermarket, but I can choose my reaction to it. I still have a choice within that. I can order online. I can go and enjoy the sun, which was out, thank God, in the UK this morning, which was awesome. Yeah. I can enjoy the sun and stand there outside of the supermarket, and I can go in and enjoy the experience of it not being so crowded. And all of these different things make a big, big difference collectively when we look at our approach to it, because we can get just equally as frustrated with having to stand outside as we can get pleased and happy about it, that we can enjoy the sun and just be in the fresh air. Yeah. So it's really always coming back to the fact that because of the legal system, because of the societal norm, because of human perceptions, the influence of the outside world is in the fact that there is certain things that we're limited with the choice as we understand it, but within the lack of choice, we still have a choice of our interpretation of that situation. When we can get our head around that, life just gets a lot easier.
It does. And there are so many lessons we can take from that.
Yeah.
I love what you say about no separation, because I think if one thing will come out of this, which effort will have everyone considering a lot, is that the fact that this is showing us that, as you said at the top of the show, the quarter of the human population are on lockdown. We are not separate. If we were separate, we'd be able to separate ourselves and that would be the end of it. But we're not. We're connected. We're deeply connected. We're rooted in each other's lives. There are connections in many, many different levels. And maybe, just maybe, coming out of that, we'll pay more attention to that connection. We'll pay more attention to our interactions with people. Our communication and our connection with people will be that much deeper, and we'll be more present in those communications and in those connections. And for that, I'm all for that. I've got to be honest with you.
Absolutely. And it's another fascinating thing is, again, watching people's perceptions and reactions and how they're interpreting situations within the supermarket. I feel that's going to be a theme of today's podcast, my trip to the supermarket.
Trip to Waitrose.
Yeah. You know, certain people would be looking around for whatever they want to pick up, and if their gaze meets yours, they smile, and you can feel that deeper connection, that just because they're so limited with their ability to interact with other humans, when they can actually even see them, maybe not physically come close and have a conversation or give someone a hug or whatever. Like, I wanted to just run up to everyone and give them a breath like this morning. But you know, like, it's that smile and that acknowledgement in their eyes that majority of the time, if we were just carrying on as normal, in inverted commas, we wouldn't do that. There's definitely a lot more of that. But on the other side, there are people that actually, we're queuing by the till, and there can literally be one person packing their stuff and paying, and another person right at the end of the little conveyor belt. Nobody else is allowed to be there at that time. So there were people that were trying to walk past but couldn't because of a trolley being in the way. So they would have to get closer than the 2 meters that they're telling us to stay away at, you know, and they would turn around. They would almost have panic in their eyes.
Right.
Turn around and walk all the way around the aisle just to get to the next checkout. So again, it's the interpretation and the perception, because you could have just said, "Oh, could you just move?" or "Excuse me, can I get past?" or whatever. But it happened so quickly that I didn't even have a chance to respond to it, because I saw the panic in the woman's face. She turned around and almost ran off. And I'm thinking, holy shit, how is that affecting the rest of your life?
Exactly. It's a great analogy for life. You know, as you said, and as you said so many times, you know, we tend to grow when we're stressed the most. We have the choice to grow at any time we want, but for some reason as humans, we wait till, you know, the shit hits the fan or our back's against the wall, or we have to do something to actually facilitate growth. I just wonder if this will be the catalyst to show people that actually we are quite adaptable, and that we can change at any time and perform new habits, new behaviors, and a new way of life even, you know, without waiting for the shit to hit the fan.
I really, truly believe that there are 2 ways out of this for all of us as humans. Varieties obviously in between, but 2 main outcomes that emergence of whatever new perceptions and new life will come out of this situation. I truly feel there's going to be either the true emergence, even though it's technically out of emergency, and that's that kind of motivation away from pain that's very short-lived, but it can very much act as a spark plug for people's evolution and growth. So if it does, if we have to be squeezed to the point of being locked down at home, be it, as long as we fucking learn from it and do something different and really truly use it as that transformational moment where we emerge with a new perception, new mindset, new outlook on life that serves us more and allows us to pursue the things that we've been putting off for months or years, that we are kinder to each other, to ourselves first before anything else. But the other aspect of it is that emergence out of emergency, where we're moving away from pain, that it's very in the moment. As long as we move away from pain, the virus is gone, we're allowed out, we're just carrying on as normal, before normal, that really wasn't working for anybody, as we know. So it's sad on one side, but on the other side, it is what it is. I believe we just get to accept the fact that we have the personal responsibility here to choose what outcome we desire. Because like I always say, that I'm pretty convinced that I would have said it on one of our previous podcasts, it is our attitude that dictates the outcome. It's not the circumstance.
No.
So we can wake up to our truth right now and make sure that we take that personal responsibility and create the outcome that we desire. Obviously adapting ourselves to the external circumstances. If you can't leave the house because you're on lockdown, well, don't leave the house, but do something with your time that's productive for you. And it could be doing nothing for someone who's been stressed and running around like a headless chicken nonstop and finally has an opportunity to rest. Do that. Your doing might be doing nothing, but it's acknowledging what it is that serves us in the moment. How do we want to interpret it, and what we're going to do with it moving forward?
Yeah, I love that, acknowledging what serves us in the moment. I think that's so powerful. And I think that, you know, given enough time, there'll be quite a few people that will be doing that. Because, and also, you know, I have this inkling in the back of my head that there could be a shift in power here. And what I mean by that is we spoke about empowerment and disempowerment. We've spoken about it an awful lot. And, you know, as we said earlier, that there's no power external to us. You know, this is an ideal opportunity to start to bring that power back inside and empower us to make different decisions. We can shop online. We can work from home. The vast majority of people will find that they can work from home in some way. If they can work from home, they can be at home. They can spend more time with the children. There's more of a family thing going on. They're not paying out for childcare. So financially, they start to get a little bit freer. It could be a very good thing.
Very much so. And again, it depends on the attitude, because I truly believe, and Cliff and I had a conversation about it a few times over the last week or so, I feel that will be an incredibly testing and challenging time for relationships. Whether families with children or without, it doesn't matter. When children come into the mix and they're off school for 6, 12 weeks, however long they're going to be off school for, without the ability to go on holiday, that's an extra level of responsibility for the parents. And that's an extra level of awareness we can either awaken ourselves to and become aware of the situation and our ability to maneuver that and how to communicate with our partners, or even with our children. If single parents are at play here, if we're talking to single parents, it's going to be challenging, but there's still the choice within that situation, how we want to approach it and what we want to do with it. And at the same time, on the other side, it could be that oblivion where people are just going to go at each other's throats, get frustrated and annoyed. There might be that little mini honeymoon effect within the first week where people like, this is amazing, we can spend so much more time together.
Almost like the holiday effect, right?
Literally that after a week or even a few days, sometimes maybe 10 days for some, will start to diminish. And that's when the calling for looking within becomes even stronger. But a lot of people won't know that this is what it is, and everything will go outwardly towards their partners, towards their kids, arguments, conflicts, misunderstandings, misinterpretations of each other's words. So I feel it's a major time, major opportunity for all of us to practice self-compassion towards ourselves. Ask ourselves, even if we have limited time to spend with ourselves, do it brushing your teeth, do it sitting on the toilet. Put your phone away and literally ask yourself, what's important for me today? What is it that I would want help with? What is it that I want to communicate? And allow yourself to be more vulnerable, more open. And I'm speaking to everybody here, but repeating what I said on an earlier podcast today, men would rather be electrocuted. 65% of guys would rather be electrocuted than talk about their feelings, according to a study. I think it was either in Canada or in America that it was done at one of the universities. That I encourage you guys to really, truly allow yourself to be even an inch more open, even a fraction more open, and express to your partners. If you don't understand your partner, say it. You don't need to say what it is you don't understand, because you don't understand it. If you feel like you need more space, just be on your own for half an hour, ask for it. And the same thing goes to ladies, to women. But for women on the other side, be more compassionate to your guys, to your partners as well. if you're in a family setting, specifically explain to them what it is that you're feeling. Because we as women very often expect you guys to kind of know what we mean. I've been there, done that.
Oh, that's where I've been going wrong all these years, right?
It's for both of us. Be more expressive and communicate more, because communication is what's going to get us through this.
Absolutely. And I think also the desire to have those conversations that are difficult.
Yeah.
You know, this is an ideal opportunity to have those, and they're never easy because they're difficult conversations. But as a guy that has had issues in the past with speaking about how I'm feeling and what's going on mentally, you're right. Just that fraction of opening is so cathartic. And once you and as a guy, I've got to tell you guys that once you start, you tend to find that, oh, actually, this isn't as bad and I feel better. So here we go. I'm going to lay it all out now.
Do you know what Brené Brown talks about it? I can't remember which one of her books that is in, but she probably would have talked about it on more than one occasion in some of her podcasts and interviews as well, that she figured out that if we can get through, I think it's either 7 or 8 seconds of that difficult conversation, we're definitely not going to die. Because literally, if there's something so challenging and difficult for us to talk about, which for majority of people will be their feelings and emotions and interpretations of what they see in front of them, it is literally a threat. It is literally a death threat to that part of our brain, that fight or flight system being activated and going, I am going to fucking die if I talk about it. You won't, I promise. Take a deep breath and listen to what Brené's saying. 7 or 8 seconds, can't remember exactly. If we can get through that, if you think about it, if we were to count 7 or 8 seconds right now, it will be very, very quick. But when you're in that heightened
like an eternity, right?
Yeah. What's going on? Like, shit, I'm going to die. The 7 or 8 seconds might feel like eternity. But when we get through this, we're good. We're not going to die.
We're not going to die. You know, I'm so pleased you said that. As I spoke earlier about the 5 things I wrote about expanding awareness, and one of them, we've done 2 of them. The third one, which ties into this so beautifully, was we interpret other people's behaviors based on our own paradigm or belief system. So we will project what we expect, the judgments that we think we're going to face, the reaction or the responses we think we're going to get based on our own belief system. But in no way, shape or form has that got anything to do with the other person who we're talking to here, right?
We assume.
Yeah.
Right? We assume. And even if we know that even if we think that we know the person in front of us very well, we still can't read their mind. We might have a historical, catalog of memories of similar situations when a husband or a wife or a partner or kids responded in a certain way. So we automatically like that, assume, and we respond on that, but that's based on our interpretation. And very often it's not actually a response, it's reaction, which is reenacting something, react, right? We recreate the same thing over and over again. So it's understanding that, we resonate at the level of our trauma, of our issues, of the shit that we've learned. We don't resonate at the level of conscious awareness, right? Unless we decide to stop, pay attention to it, ask ourselves, am I reacting? Am I responding? Am I being a dick here? Or am I actually taking responsibility for what I'm saying, what I'm about to say, what I'm about to do? And then we can look at the situation from a completely different perspective. But it literally takes that moment of catching ourselves, taking a deep breath, calming ourselves down, and then deciding on what we're going to say, do what we're going to ask. But even if sometimes on autopilot we run into our patterns and react rather than respond, you can still take a step back then. You can still take a deep breath. You can still go, holy shit, I didn't mean that. And it's not even about saying I'm sorry, because when you say I'm sorry in that moment, you're telling yourself that you've done something wrong. But you haven't really technically, because it's not you who reacted. It's a version of you that you least preferred that just run in there on autopilot, and it was just like, fuck this shit, I'm coming in, I'm doing this, right? And I've
got this, yeah.
Like that little kid, that angry little kid that just comes in and throws a toy, out the pram and whatever, and kicks up a shitstorm and punches the floor and whatever. That's that part of us. It's that scared and threatened little child that comes in and does all of that stuff and wreaks havoc, right? But when we allow ourselves to understand that it is that scared part of us, and we can go and have a conversation with that part of us. But when we're in front of our partner and maybe we just kicked up a shitstorm and threw our toys at the pram, we can go, hey, I didn't mean that. It was a different version of me that was just threatened. It was scared. I was scared when that little version of me took over. I didn't understand what's going on. Can we talk about it? And I understand that it's symbolic to say I'm sorry in that moment as well, but remember your intention behind it. Because if you really tell yourself I'm sorry and you feel that guilt and shame, you telling yourself you've done something wrong. So you're invalidating yourself and you're putting yourself down, which is never going to help in actually working through that emotion and that reaction and that explosion of emotion that might have just come out of you.
Yeah, I love that you spoke about that gap. I mean, Viktor Frankl, I think, famously said that between stimulus and response, there's a gap, and that's where you want to get in. So we talk about a stimulus like a word, a phrase, a sentence, a thought, anything that creates this reactory stimulus, reactory response. You've got to get into that gap there. You've got to break that pattern of, jumping in and just allowing habitual thoughts, habitual stories, habitual narratives to direct your next response. You've got to look for that gap. I think that's so very, very important.
Definitely. That's where the assessment can happen.
Yeah.
Is it what I'm about to say what I really mean? Is it what I'm about to do what I really want to do? Or am I just reacting out of fear, out of resentment, out of frustration? And I really feel this time right now, especially when we're on lockdown, it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to pay attention to our triggers. And I said that to several clients over the last week that are in a relationship, that are being at home with their kids, with their partners, that can't really do much other than maybe go outside in the garden, maybe a short walk, but really most of the time they're stuck indoors. And especially with younger children, the weight of the responsibility that they have on themselves, and also together with working from home, there is very little time and space for them to be with themselves or with each other, without the children as well. But at the same time, through this challenge, we can watch and observe our triggers. And we can get so ultra clear through that time on what words, what situations add that reactory stimulus that you talked about, that for the rest of our lives, practically, we can have a cheat list, like a cheat sheet of all of that stuff, because we can work it out in that intense period of 2 or 3 weeks of being stuck indoors. Again, attitude. We can think about, holy shit, what's going to happen? We're just going to argue. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be awful. How are we going to deal with this? Or you can just pay attention to all of that and go, when my wife does this, this is how I'm feeling. This is what it means to me. I'm going to have a conversation about that. Whether we can work that a different way. When my husband does or doesn't do this, that's how I react. I didn't realize that it was that situation, that action, that word. And when you dig a little bit deeper, you understand it's nothing to do with your partners. It just reminds you of something that happened years ago as a kid, and it meant something to you. It was deeply meaningful, usually on the negative side.
Of course, yeah.
I had a conversation with Cliff a few weeks ago. My mom sent me a picture. She went out for a long walk and sent me a picture of my preschool building. I don't know if did we talk about that? I can't remember. I seem to think we might have talked about this. Yeah. And literally all my memories were of something of a negative tint, with a negative tint that I've got from that building. And I'm thinking, I spent 3 years, I think, of my life in that building, an enormous amount of incredible memories that I just suitably put away and not accessible to me right now unless I actually really sit and think about it. But on tap like that literally is the situations that were tinted negatively. They're just there, available. But really, it's a gift in a way, because our brain uses that as a piece of feedback that it bounces off of every time something similar happens for us like that in the future. We don't want to go there. So it protects us.
It's a great survival thing, right?
It is. But on the other side, if we're thinking from just the pleasure of reminiscing and thinking about nice things, if you can't access that, but you remember all the shit, you think, why do I even operate that way, right?
It's one of those mysteries, isn't it? Really, it just keeps us, that can keep us trapped forever. It can keep us trapped in that negative loop, going on and never understanding why these things are happening to us.
I love using good old sat navs as an example here, and that's Maxwell Maltz, Psycho-Cybernetics.
Yeah.
About our personal navigation system, right? And our personal sat nav in our brain.
That's a great book, by the way.
It is. I love it. And if you think about, we're using negative feedback to bounce off of it and forget about it. Why do our memories get prettier and nicer over time, right? I've worked it out years ago when I was reading that book, and I thought, oh shit, it makes so much sense. Our memories get better and prettier and nicer over time because we discard the negative feedback, because it's meant to happen that way. We're meant to bounce off of it. It's like sat nav. When we take a wrong turn, it will redirect itself and straight back on track, and off we go towards our destination. The woman or the guy, whoever is our sat nav voice, they don't think about the fact that you just took a wrong turn. They don't call you an idiot for taking a wrong turn.
They don't bring it up weeks later as well, do they? When you
remember,
you've done that before. Why'd you keep doing that?
There was a sat nav like that. It would be incredible. Anyway, so if you think any computers, technology, anything available to us right now is based on and created based on what we understand about the human brain. So the beauty and the curse of our evolution is that we develop prefrontal cortex that can give context to what we do and what we talk about and the situations we're experiencing. However, it can just as much screw us over, because rather than bouncing off of that negative feedback, so taking a wrong turn in life, for example, rather than going, oh shit, I wasn't meant to go that way. I know now I wasn't meant to go that way because this happened. I'm just going to course correct myself and go towards my destination. That's what's meant to happen. But because we have the ability to add context to it, we could go, I'm so grateful that I bounced off of that feedback and I'm back on track. But what do majority of us do? Ruminate.
Yeah.
Ponder forever, can't sleep, go to sleep thinking about that wrong turn, wake up thinking about that wrong turn, judge the entire existence, their past and their future, by that one seemingly wrong decision. But really, truly, it's just a piece of negative feedback for you to confirm that this is not the way you want to go.
Course correct, right?
This is the way you want to go. Definitely course correct, keep going, discard that piece of information. That's why our memories get better over time, when we understand it, how it works. But majority of us, unfortunately, hold on to that negative feedback for dear life and don't want to let it go, because it allows us to feel like a victim. It allows us to feel sorry for ourselves. It allows us to make ourselves a lesser human, a lesser version of ourselves, and therefore stop us from doing what we want to do, to live the life that we choose to live and want to live consciously.
Yeah, because we're used to effectively making a story up about how we're not good enough, how we're to blame for everything that goes wrong. It's crazy. And, I have to say that we didn't speak about these 5 things that I wrote in a Facebook post the other day beforehand. But every time you give us such wonderful content, you lead directly into one of them.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Synchronistic.
What's the next one?
Another one was the conditions we face and the judgments we make are totally subjective experiences, which is just the way you've just described it with the sat nav example is beautiful. It just is exactly what I was trying to get over in that point.
Yeah, we can't live our life without judgment. Any spiritual teachings or texts or whatever it might be that talk about shedding judgment, I feel are misunderstood by us reading them, because remember, I think it was the first time we spoke, it was the judgment versus discernment. We talked about it at some point.
Yes.
We have to, in this world that we agreed to live in, with the 3-dimensional reality that we live in, we need the dualistic approach. It is an illusion in the grander scheme of things. When you understand anything from a higher perspective, we can't really truly understand it within the 3
because we're of it as well. It's
grasp the concept. But here right now, to physically live our life, we need the contrast, we need the duality. So we need to be able to compare ourselves to others to assess whether what we're doing serves us or not. But the way we use it is to push our shit onto another person. Oh, you're being stupid, therefore it's your fault. Rather than going, interesting point of view, but I don't agree, and that's okay. That's comparison, but a very different way of judgment and comparison to serve us and to use it to confirm with ourselves, again, the direction we're going, our desires in life, without discrediting and invalidating others and others' points of view. Every single one of us will have an opinion, right? They always say they're like assholes. Everyone's got one, right? But if you think about it, like every single person's, and it is very challenging, especially with what's going on right now, expressing your opinion through social media, especially for people to understand it, because there are so many people with so many strong opinions rooted in the victim mentality, rooted in the external power and force over us, that they just won't be able to grasp that and understand that it doesn't matter. Yes, we're on lockdown. Yes, we physically can't go outside as much as we would want to, but still within that, we do have a choice. So if you then say that their interpretation and their judgment is personal and very relative to them and their situation, they'll be like, well, that's not the case because no one can go outside. Well, yes, but every single person has a choice of responding to it in the way that they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you've put that. It reminds me a lot of reading The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, when he talks about mind and no mind. And I think people misinterpret that as well. He's talking about using your mind for what it's there for, not being used by it. So not having all this negativity that we've spoken about at length today. And I think judgment is very much the same sort of thing. You know, we do live in a dualistic world. We do need that contrast. You do need to know when things are bad so that you can recognize when they're good, you know. And I think that by that same token, when things are going not quite so well, you know that there's an opposite there because it's a duality, right? There is an up and down, a left and a right, a back and front, and a good and a bad. So when things seem to be at their worst, you know that good is there as well if you choose to look for it. And I think that there's so much power in that.
And the only reason why you know that something is bad or not going well, it's only because you would have experienced at some point, even though it might have been, you know, a minute version and part of your life, you would have had to experience what good feels like.
Absolutely.
Feeling good, having a good life in whatever way, shape or form, because you wouldn't be able to label the situation right now as bad. And that's the power within that we do have that choice of interpretation of it, the remembrance of the fact that with every contraction comes an expansion. I was talking about that last night on live stream in our group, where if we think of the enormity of the contraction that the world is going through right now, just think of the enormity of the expansion that will follow, when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. That's down to every single one of us individually, because that expansion is available to everybody. Yeah. But whether we're going to step into it and allow ourselves to experience, it's down to us. Yeah. So certain people will stay in that contraction because they're going to want to hold on to that negative feedback so dearly, like I said before, that they won't be able to see the expansion coming. But my hope and my trust is that majority of us will be able to really truly see the enormity of the expansions that has to come, because it is the duality, like we talked about. Every contraction is followed by expansion, and then there's going to be another contraction, another expansion.
It's like the seasons, right? It's just like the seasons. You know, you have your winter, your spring, your summer, your autumn, and everything.
There might be
times when this is our winter right now. We're indoors. We're just preparing for the spring and the growth. So laying the seeds, having some clearing of the mind, clearing of the belief patterns, clearing of the soil, putting new seeds in, new ideas for new growth will be allowed out again. The restrictions will be lifted. That's our spring, when it all grows. And then the summer will come when we'll reap the rewards of it. And then in the autumn, we can drop all the things. And this is the thing that I love, right, about autumn. The autumn is the shedding of all the crap that we've accumulated along the way, because I don't care who we are, we accumulate crap. We can sit there and say we're as holier as now as we want, but we will accumulate crap along the way, and we need to drop that. And so many people don't do that.
Yeah. And it's allowing ourselves to let go of that, because then you've got that identity trap where we can get trapped with an identity that we know doesn't serve us, but we married so it's so strongly and tightly that we completely miss the point of the autumn and the winter, where we're meant to shed all of that crap. We're meant to rest before we reawaken again. Absolutely. And start sowing our seeds to just, again, have another harvest.
Exactly.
It takes a lot of, again, you know, going back to how Cliff and I work through awareness, responsibility, and action, it takes a lot of awareness and a huge amount of personal responsibility, radical personal responsibility, to be able to then take actions in alignment with that, in alignment with the seasons, with the cycles. Everything is cyclical in life.
Yeah, and I think people just want to be in the summer all the time. And I think that's where the problem comes from, because there's that disconnect, because they can't be, and they're being forced into a winter, they're being forced into an autumn, and they just are resistant of it. There's no trust. There's no trust.
And if you're in the summer for too long, you're not even going to know what it is anymore, because you don't have the feedback and the contrast.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that it's almost the end of March and we still had ice in the little fountain in the garden this morning, thinking, holy crap, I haven't experienced it for 5 years living in Cyprus and not really spending much time in the winter and the early spring in Europe, mainland Europe, whether in Poland or in the UK. I'm really appreciating it. It's maybe not that comfortable walking the dog in the evening because it feels cold, but just to wake up to that freshness, it's incredible. And I've not had that. So the summer and the heat and the constant humidity in Cyprus wasn't as appealing anymore.
No.
Because I've lost the contrast.
Wow. That's a great way of putting it, a really good way of putting it. And once again, Marta, I think we've absolutely nailed a podcast. I really do.
It's so much fun. We could just keep going for hours. I love it.
I know. And back next month again. Absolutely. Another one. But thank you once again for coming on and giving us the benefit of your wisdom and your experience and your knowledge. It truly is an honor to have you on these podcasts, and I'm delighted that you do it. It's a pleasure. Thank you.